crucial mechanism in relations between states. The United Nations Organization remains the main intergovernmental and universal instrument for building together a fairer, more peaceful and more fraternal world. Let us ensure that it can continue to play its role as a forum for the people of the United Nations, where together we can find joint solutions to the problems we share. Thank you very much. On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister and Minister for Social Affairs and Labour of the Republic of Haiti for the statement just made.
I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Malaysia to introduce an address by the head of government.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor and privilege to introduce the Honorable Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob, Prime Minister of Malaysia. Thank you.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I join others in congratulating you, Mr. President, on your election as President of 76th session of the UN General Assembly. I would also like to thank His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkir for his dedication and leadership in successfully completing the work of the last session, which was done under difficult circumstances due to the prevailing COVID-19 pandemic. Malaysia welcomes the theme of this year's General Assembly, Building Resilience Through Hope, to recover from COVID-19, rebuild sustainably, respond to the needs of the planet, respect the rights of the people, and revitalize the United Nations. The theme serves as a stark reminder of what needs to be done and the long road we have before us. Mr. President, Malaysia is fully committed in managing, overcoming and recovering from this deadly pandemic. No one is safe unless everyone is safe. We must fight this battle together. Our common missions in these unprecedented times call us to recognize that humankind is one big extended family. It is in that spirit that we in Malaysia have very consciously referred to ourselves as Keluarga Malaysia. Together and putting aside our differences, we'll protect life and livelihoods. We will ensure that Malaysia will not only bounce back, but will thrive as the world emerges from the depth of the pandemic. But Mr. President, I'm not here to only speak about Malaysia. I'm here to call for us to work together in the spirit of a world family to address the deep-rooted challenges of inequality, political instability, and global governance. Last year, the international community came together with a pledge to fight COVID-19 hand in hand. With our unified commitment, with the aggressive rollout of vaccine, and with the sharing and adoption of best practices, we should have been on our way to recovery. Sadly, the reality today is that we are far from winning the war against this deadly virus. Our relief that vaccines were developed in record time was quickly followed by distress at its discriminatory rollout. While most vaccine-producing nations, as well as those that have the financial means, have achieved some measure of success, the majority of the world's population, mainly from the middle income and least developed countries, remain unvaccinated. Nevertheless, our focus should not just be on vaccines. There are other aspects of health and require our attention. Many health challenges transcend national borders. COVID-19 is just the latest challenge besetting us. Before that, the international community had to deal with other serious outbreaks which had their unique security and socio-economic dimension. With the growing frequency of global health threats, this world family must come together and engage in more effective health diplomacy. We must ensure greater collaboration, not just to end this pandemic, but on an array of other health-related issues. These include expanding the public health capacity of nations, particularly by enhancing their access to relevant technology and knowledge. We truly need to regard public health as a global public good rather than the exclusive domain of individual nations. It is because of this that Malaysia will play a more prominent role and participate more actively in health diplomacy, and our approach will be more interdisciplinary in nature and involve more relevant stakeholders. As for COVID-19, we cannot afford to wait for an even deadlier variant to emerge and claim more life. We need to act now. Mr. President, the path towards achieving the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was never easy to begin with. Yet, we have made steady progress. COVID-19 has, however, reversed many hard-won gains. The pandemic has amplified pre-existing inequalities and uncertainties. It has widened the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Varying degrees of shortfalls in governance and social security have driven populations back into poverty. Needless to say, we are further away from achieving the 2030 Agenda now than we were before. Like the rest of the world, Malaysia's economy has not been spared. In 2020, Malaysia's GDP contracted by 5.6%. This marks the worst decline in more than 20 years since the Asian financial crisis. From the beginning of the pandemic, Malaysia took a whole of government and whole of society approach in addressing this unprecedented crisis. We executed a clear strategy with focus on three thrusts. Firstly, we expanded our healthcare delivery system to prevent the spread and tend to the infected. Secondly, we provided strategic fiscal injections to safeguard the economy. And thirdly, we protected the people's livelihood. In doing so, we introduced economic stimulus package worth about 130 billion USD or 36% of our GDP. We ensured inclusive growth by addressing poverty while providing a social safety net to protect vulnerable groups. These packages also play an important role in assisting enterprises to remain afloat during these difficult times. Almost 2 years into the pandemic, we realized that we need to balance between keeping our people safe while protecting their livelihoods. As such, Malaysia introduced the National Recovery Plan as the nation's exit strategy from the pandemic. This includes speeding up vaccination rates, which stand at more than 500,000 doses daily in recent weeks. It also includes reopening key economic sectors to revive the economy. We are pleased that these efforts, as well as our pursuit in attaining the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development, were commended during our voluntary national review in July this year. That said, rebuilding lives and economies after the pandemic will not come easy. The challenges are even greater for countries that are more vulnerable to natural disasters. Recovery efforts will certainly be more difficult and thus require more time and resources to take effect. For Malaysia, mainstreaming sustainability is key in ensuring a smooth transition to a greener socio-economic ecosystem. We have set ambitious plans to facilitate the transition to a more sustainable